They called the cops on my wife for suspicious activity in our own driveway, not knowing she was the cops. Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Diane's unmarked cruiser sits in our driveway, diesel exhaust still hanging in the evening air. Our HOA president, Cheryl Blackwood, is on the sidewalk, camera phone clicking away like she's documenting evidence for CSI. 2 patrol cars arrive within minutes. Officers jump out, ready for action until they recognize the suspicious person. "Evening, Sheriff Torino," Deputy Martinez says, touching his cap. We got a call about..." Diane just points at her badge. The awkward silence is deafening. Cheryl's face goes white. The gravel crunches under her feet as she backs away, finally realizing she just called the police on the police. This was the moment I knew we were dealing with someone who'd picked the wrong fight with the wrong family. What would you do if your HOA targeted you in your own home? Drop where you're watching from and buckle up for this ride. Let me back up and introduce the players in this suburban battlefield. I'm Jake Torino, 42, former Marine who traded desert combat for a different kind of warfare, historic home restoration. There's something therapeutic about bringing century-old houses back to life, especially after you've seen how quickly things can be destroyed overseas. My wife Diane is 38, our elected county sheriff going on her 3rd term. She's the kind of person who grew up knowing that respect isn't given. It's earned through action, not position. When she pins on that badge every morning, she's representing 127,000 county residents who trust her to do the job right. 6 months ago, we found our dream home, a 1920s craftsman in Maplewood Estates that needed serious love. The scent of old wood polish still lingered in the hallways, mixed with decades of family memories. Original hardwood floors hid under industrial carpet, crown molding begged for restoration, and windows hadn't seen proper maintenance since Truman was president. We were that couple, working long hours, proud of every careful improvement, excited to show neighbors our progress. Naive, maybe, but genuinely enthusiastic about joining a community. Then we met the neighborhood watch. Cheryl Blackwood, 51, reigned as HOA president for 4 consecutive terms. Unopposed elections tend to happen when nobody else wants to spend their evenings arguing about mailbox colors and acceptable fence heights. She lived in a pristine McMansion that looked like it came with a homeowner's manual instead of character. All beige siding and perfectly geometric landscaping. Cheryl was a retired insurance adjuster, which explained her supernatural ability to find problems where none existed. Her husband, Marshall, worked in city planning, giving her just enough insider knowledge to be truly dangerous. Together, they formed what I'd later learn was a 2-person crime syndicate disguised as civic leadership. The morning everything started, I was loading my work truck while savoring the peaceful sounds of suburban dawn, birds chirping, coffee brewing somewhere nearby. Then aggressive doorbell ringing shattered the tranquility like a fire alarm. "Mr. Torino," Cheryl announced, standing on our porch with the posture of a debt collector, "you're violating HOA commercial vehicle restrictions." She thrust a citation at me, $150 for parking my own truck in my own driveway. "Section 12.4.7b, she continued, consulting her phone like she was reading scripture, "clearly prohibits overnight commercial vehicle storage in residential driveways." Here's what she didn't mention. This rule had been quietly added during an emergency board meeting 6 months earlier. No homeowner notification, no community input, no actual emergency. Just Cheryl and 2 hand-picked board members making policy in what amounted to a closed-door session. Meanwhile, and this is rich, Marshall's city planning department truck sat in their driveway every single night. Apparently municipal vehicles qualified for a special exemption that Cheryl had thoughtfully written for herself. As I researched those covenant documents that night, the brittle pages crackling between my fingers, I discovered we weren't her only targets. 3 other families had received similar treatment, and the pattern was unmistakable. Sarah Chen, a kindergarten teacher, got cited for excessive seasonal decorations. She'd hung 2 wreaths. The Rodriguez family, both working double shifts at the hospital, received untimely trash placement violations because their work schedules didn't align with pickup times. Harold Murphy, a 74-year-old Vietnam veteran, was told his American flag display was improperly configured according to HOA aesthetic standards. All hardworking families, all people who didn't quite fit Cheryl's vision of suburban perfection. During our first real confrontation, when I questioned the truck citation, Cheryl's carefully maintained facade slipped just enough to reveal what we were really dealing with. "We have to maintain appropriate standards," she said, her eyes taking in my work clothes and calloused hands, "for families who understand neighborhood values." The way she emphasized understand made her meaning crystal clear. What Cheryl didn't know was that she'd picked a fight with the wrong family. She was building her case against us for when the sheriff wasn't around. Problem was, the sheriff lived here. Cheryl's first real power move came 2 weeks later, and it was a masterclass in suburban psychological warfare. Saturday morning, I'm replacing rotted porch boards when the unmistakable whir of an electric drill echoes across the street. Cheryl's installing what she calls a security camera on her front porch. The angle, however, tells a completely different story. This thing isn't pointed at the street or her own property. It's aimed directly at our driveway, like a military reconnaissance device, capturing every square foot of our front yard and probably half our living room windows. The metallic click of its autofocus mechanism becomes our new daily soundtrack, constantly adjusting as it tracks any movement around our home. "Community safety," Cheryl announces to anyone within earshot. "With all the suspicious activity lately, responsible homeowners must protect their property values." Right, because apparently a sheriff and a licensed contractor represent the height of neighborhood criminality. Within days, Cheryl transforms into a one-woman surveillance state. She documents everything with obsessive precision. Trash cans positioned 30 minutes before pickup, my garden hose improperly coiled after watering, Diane's unmarked cruiser parked at non-regulation angles. Her dedication would be impressive if it weren't completely unhinged. She creates detailed photo logs with timestamps, submitting weekly violation reports to her hand-picked HOA board. It's like having your own personal NSA agent, except this one has nothing better to do and a serious superiority complex. But here's where Cheryl makes her first major tactical error. She forgot I'm not some random homeowner who will roll over for petty authority. My evenings become research sessions into surveillance regulations. Thanks to my military background, I knew enough to start with federal privacy statutes, and what I discovered gave me everything I needed. Turns out private cameras recording beyond property boundaries without consent violate multiple laws, something most people never think to check until it's too late. The reasonable expectation of privacy protection covers residential driveways specifically, which meant Cheryl had just handed me a slam-dunk legal violation. My counterattack is pure military precision. I file formal complaints with county planning about unauthorized surveillance equipment. Then I install my own security system, strategically positioned to document Cheryl's violations while staying completely within legal bounds. The irony is absolutely delicious. While she's photographing my crimes, I'm building a comprehensive record of her actual violations. Marshall's city vehicle parked illegally overnight, midnight sprinkler usage during drought restrictions, grass clippings dumped in storm drains, real violations with real penalties. But then comes the discovery that changes everything. One evening, reviewing my counter-surveillance footage, I noticed something that makes my blood run cold. Cheryl's camera isn't just watching us. It's positioned to capture the mailman delivering to 6 different houses, record conversations between neighbors walking their dogs, and document the daily schedules of everyone on our block. She's not building a case against us. She's creating a surveillance database on half the neighborhood. I call over Harold Murphy, the Vietnam vet she'd cited for improper flag display. At 74, Harold's still sharp as a tack and doesn't miss much. "Take a look at this." I show him the camera angles I've mapped out. Harold studies the footage for about 30 seconds before shaking his head. "Son, in the military we called this pattern of life intelligence gathering. You only collect this much data when you're planning something big." That's when it hits me. This isn't random HOA harassment. This is organized reconnaissance with a specific objective. Cheryl knows when everyone leaves for work, who gets what deliveries, which families have irregular schedules, who talks to whom. The question becomes, what is she planning to do with all this information? As I watch her camera's infrared lights bleeding through our bedroom curtains that night, casting eerie red shadows across the ceiling, one thing becomes crystal clear. Cheryl has confused running a homeowners association with operating a surveillance state. In her obsession with documenting our violations, she's created a massive paper trail of her own illegal activities. Every time-stamped photo, every violation report, every community safety email is building a prosecutable case, just not the one she thinks she's building. The smell of evening barbecue from neighbors' yards now mixes with the tension of knowing we're being watched. Our peaceful suburban routine has become a chess match, but Cheryl doesn't realize she's playing against someone who's actually read the rulebook. Harold claps me on the shoulder as he leaves. Remember, son, sometimes the best defense is letting your enemy defeat themselves. Wise words from a wise man. Cheryl's about to learn that surveillance is a two-way street, and she'd just driven into traffic going the wrong direction. If Cheryl thought the camera surveillance would intimidate us, she clearly hadn't done her homework on Marines. Her next escalation proved she was committed to doubling down on stupid. 3 weeks into our surveillance standoff, I'm in my garage workshop at 7 a.m., carefully restoring original window hardware from our craftsman. The sweet smell of wood stain mixed with morning coffee, my perfect Saturday morning ritual until my phone shattered the peace. Mr. Torino, Tony Morales, County Building Inspector, I've received multiple reports about unlicensed construction activities at your residence. Multiple reports. Someone had been very busy making phone calls. 20 minutes later, Tony pulls into our driveway while Cheryl magically appears on her front porch, coffee mug in hand, watching like she's got front row seats to her favorite show. The satisfied smirk on her face told me exactly who'd been burning up the inspector's phone lines. I have to investigate these complaints, Tony explained, genuinely apologetic. Someone reported illegal contracting operations, unpermitted construction work, potential safety violations. I walked Tony through everything. Every permit properly displayed, professional licensing current, insurance certificates organized in labeled folders. My workshop was cleaner than most commercial operations he inspected. Military precision has its advantages. Whoever called this in owes me an apology and you a beer, Tony muttered, clearly annoyed at the waste of time. But as he was wrapping up, Tony said something that stopped me cold. Off the record, Jake, this is my 4th bogus call from Maplewood Estates this month. Someone's working overtime to jam up my schedule with fake complaints. That's when the pieces clicked. Cheryl wasn't just harassing us, she was conducting systematic warfare against anyone who threatened her suburban fantasy. My evening research revealed the delicious irony of our situation. While Cheryl was reporting my illegal construction, her own property was a permit violation goldmine. That stunning sunroom addition? 0 permits on file. The expanded deck pushing into the utility easement? Completely undocumented. The outdoor kitchen that definitely required electrical and plumbing permits? Not even a hint of paperwork. See, during my contracting years, I'd learned that building departments are bureaucratic treasure troves. They keep records of everything, and homeowners who try to skip the permit process usually hang themselves with their own shortcuts. Most people never think to cross-reference property improvement histories with permit databases until someone starts digging, so I started digging. Tuesday evening, I knocked on Harold Murphy's door. The 74-year-old Vietnam vet had been asking smart questions around the neighborhood, and I figured 2 tactical minds were better than 1. Son, Harold said, inviting me in, I've been wondering when someone would start connecting these dots. Harold had spent weeks researching HOA governance laws and discovered something beautiful. Cheryl's 4-year presidency violated state corporate regulations requiring term limits and proper election procedures. Her entire authority structure was legally questionable. Better yet, Harold continued, pulling out a manila folder thick with documents, I've been talking to other targeted families. This isn't random enforcement, it's systematic discrimination. Over the next hour, Harold showed me patterns that would make any prosecutor salivate. Every family receiving violations was either working class, minority, or didn't conform to Cheryl's unspoken social standards. Meanwhile, obvious violations in her preferred demographic got ignored completely. But the real mini twist came Thursday morning. I'm loading my truck when Tony Morales calls back, his voice tight with anger. Jake, I need you to know something happened yesterday. Marshall Blackwood cornered me at City Hall, suggesting I prioritize certain neighborhoods for enforcement. When I told him I treat everyone equally, he got specific about budget allocations affecting my department. My blood went cold. He tried to bribe you? Let's call it attempted administrative coercion, Tony replied carefully. 20 years I've done this job with integrity, and some planning department bureaucrat thinks he can pressure me into selective enforcement? The conversation that followed was enlightening. Tony explained that Marshall had been subtle but clear, cooperate with their enforcement priorities, or face departmental budget cuts. Classic corruption, dressed up in municipal language. When Diane arrived home that evening, the smell of her patrol car's diesel exhaust mixing with neighbors' dinner preparations, I filled her in on Marshall's attempted bribery of a county official. Her expression shifted from tired to professionally focused. "That's felony corruption of a public official," she said quietly. "They just escalated petty HOA harassment into criminal territory." Cheryl and Marshall had made a critical error. They'd assumed they were dealing with typical suburbanites who'd roll over for official-sounding authority. Instead, they'd picked a fight with a sheriff, a Marine, and a coalition of neighbors who'd just discovered their opponents were actual criminals. Time to show them what organized resistance looks like. Cheryl's next move crossed a line that could have gotten me killed, and she knew it. Wednesday evening, I'm in the garage putting finishing touches on a custom cabinet door, delicate work requiring absolute focus. The rhythmic whisper of my hand planner shaving paper-thin curls was almost meditative, wood dust dancing in the workshop's warm light. Diane was pulling a double shift, so I had the house to myself and planned to work until midnight. Around 9:30 p.m., blue and red lights suddenly strobed through my garage like an angry kaleidoscope. 2 patrol cars came screaming down our street, tires squealing as they hit our driveway. I dropped my tools and stepped outside, hands clearly visible as Deputies Martinez and Foster jumped out with that particular tension cops carry when responding to domestic violence calls. "Jake Torino," Martinez called out, hand hovering near his service weapon. "We received reports of a domestic disturbance. Shouting, sounds of violence, possible ongoing assault." My brain processed this in milliseconds. Diane was at work. I'd been alone for hours. The only assault happening was me attacking a stubborn piece of walnut with a hand planer. "Deputies, my wife is Sheriff Torino," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. "She's working the night shift. I've been in my workshop alone since 6 o'clock. The change in their expressions was immediate and almost comical. Martinez actually groaned out loud. "Jesus, Jake," Foster muttered, keying his radio. "Dispatch, show us code 4. False alarm at Sheriff Torino's residence." But here's the thing about false police reports. They generate paperwork. Paperwork creates patterns, and I had a very strong suspicion about our concerned citizen. "Who made the report?" I asked. Martinez checked his notes, looking increasingly annoyed. "Anonymous caller claimed to hear screaming and sounds of a violent struggle from this address, said they were deeply concerned for resident safety, and had credible reasons to believe domestic violence was occurring." Anonymous my ass. After they left, I sat in my workshop surrounded by the comforting smell of wood shavings and mineral spirits, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. Cheryl hadn't just called police. She'd specifically reported domestic violence, timed for when Diane was working, hoping arriving officers would find a dangerous suspect and make an arrest. The implications were terrifying. If I'd been any other homeowner, if those deputies hadn't recognized our address immediately, this could have ended with me face down on my own driveway, or worse. False domestic violence calls have gotten innocent men shot by police who arrived expecting a violent situation. Friday morning brought the breakthrough I needed, courtesy of Deputy Martinez. "Jake, you need to hear this," he said, calling from the station. "My supervisor pulled the dispatch recording for review. That anonymous caller? She specifically told our dispatcher she had reliable law enforcement contacts who'd confirmed suspicious activity at your address." The pieces clicked into place like a perfectly fitted joint. Cheryl had claimed official backing for her false report, probably referencing Marshall's city planning connections. What she didn't realize was that impersonating law enforcement authority transformed her misdemeanor harassment into felony territory. She essentially claimed to have insider police intelligence supporting her domestic violence report, Martinez continued, his professional anger evident. "That's not just false reporting anymore, that's corruption of official process with impersonation elements." My counterattack was swift and comprehensive. I filed detailed harassment complaints with multiple agencies, providing complete timelines of Cheryl's escalating behavior. But the real ammunition came from my research into her pattern of false reports. Over 18 months, Cheryl had weaponized emergency services 6 different times against neighbors who didn't meet her social standards. Sarah Chen got reported for suspicious late-night activity. She was grading kindergarten papers past 10 p.m. The Rodriguez family faced a welfare check because their teenagers were acting aggressively while shooting hoops in their own driveway. Harold Murphy's flag ceremony with fellow veterans became a possible illegal gathering requiring investigation. Every call anonymous. Every call timed for maximum disruption. Every call targeting working families who threatened her suburban fantasy. When Diane came home that evening, her uniform still carrying the faint scent of courthouse disinfectant after a long court day, I showed her the complete documentation of Cheryl's false report campaign. "Jake," she said, her voice carrying 20 years of law enforcement authority, "what Cheryl just did isn't harassment anymore. Filing false domestic violence reports with fabricated official backing? That's felony corruption of governmental process. Cheryl had made the fatal error of assuming police would automatically believe her over us. Instead, she'd just handed us a prosecutable case that could put her behind bars for years. Time to show her what happens when you try to weaponize law enforcement against a sheriff's family. Game over, Cheryl. Sometimes the best intelligence comes from the most boring sources. In this case, it was a stack of municipal paperwork that would make Cheryl's surveillance operation look like amateur hour. Saturday morning, I'm at the county clerk's office researching building permit histories. Partly for my harassment complaint, partly because something about Marshall's city planning connections had been nagging at me. When you've dealt with enough municipal bureaucracy, you develop a sixth sense for when things don't add up. I need to cross-reference HOA financial filings with county assessment records, I told the clerk, a pleasant woman named Betty, who'd been helping residents navigate bureaucratic maze for 30 years. "Honey, you might want to sit down for this," Betty said after pulling Maplewood Estates records. "Your HOA owes the county $78,000 in unpaid assessments. They're facing municipal lien procedures." The room suddenly felt very quiet. HOAs collect monthly dues specifically to pay county assessments, municipal fees, and community maintenance. Where had $78,000 gone? Betty pulled additional records, her expression growing more concerned with each page. "According to these filings, your HOA board has been reporting minimal cash reserves for 3 years running, but residents have been paying full monthly dues the entire time." The beautiful, terrible picture emerged as I studied the documents. Cheryl had been systematically diverting monthly HOA dues into accounts not listed on official financial reports. New violation fines were being used to cover shortfalls in county payments, creating a shell game that kept the missing money hidden from residents. But the real bombshell came when Betty cross-referenced Cheryl's background through state business licensing databases. "Mr. Torino," she said carefully, "your HOA president has a previous fraud conviction from Nevada, embezzlement from a homeowners association in Las Vegas 2018. She served 18 months probation. My hands actually shook as I processed this information. Cheryl wasn't just a power-hungry neighbor. She was a repeat offender who'd moved to our state and immediately targeted another HOA for the same scam. The pattern became crystal clear. All her harassment targets had been homeowners asking questions about budget transparency, requesting financial statements, or inquiring about reserve funds. She'd been systematically intimidating anyone who might discover her embezzlement operation. That evening, I spread the financial documents across our dining room table while Diane reviewed them with a prosecutor's eye for evidence. The smell of her evening coffee mixed with the musty scent of old paperwork as we connected the dots. "Jake, this changes everything," she said, pointing to a series of transfers from the main HOA account to an entity called Maplewood Community Services, LLC. "That's Cheryl's personal company. She's been paying herself consulting fees for services she never provided. The total theft was staggering, $127,000 over 3 years, hidden through false financial reports and covered up by aggressive violation enforcement. Every $150 fine for improper parking, every $75 citation for aesthetic violations, all of it was going toward covering the massive hole in the HOA's legitimate budget. But here's what made this discovery truly powerful. HOA board members are personally liable for organizational debt when they've engaged in financial mismanagement. Cheryl's house, her cars, her bank accounts, everything was potentially subject to seizure for the money she'd stolen. More importantly, the Financial Crimes Unit was part of Diane's department. District Attorney Rebecca Chen, no relation to our neighbor Sarah, was Diane's close friend from the police academy and had built her career prosecuting exactly this type of white-collar crime. "This isn't just theft anymore," Diane explained, organizing the evidence into prosecutable stacks. "This is organized racketeering. Cheryl used her official position to intimidate victims, filed false reports to silence witnesses, and created fraudulent documents to hide evidence. That's RICO territory." Cheryl's desperate harassment campaign suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was a cornered criminal trying to prevent discovery of ongoing felonies. The power dynamic had completely shifted. We weren't dealing with an annoying neighbor anymore. We were sitting on evidence that could send Cheryl to prison for decades. By Sunday morning, our dining room looked like a war room, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Harold Murphy arrived first, carrying a thermos of black coffee that could wake the dead and a manila folder thick enough to stop bullets. At 74, the man still moved with military precision, scanning our evidence spread before settling into strategy mode. "Son, I've seen enemy intelligence operations with less documentation than what Cheryl's created," he said, studying the financial records. "She's been building her own prosecution case without realizing it." Sarah Chen joined us 20 minutes later, followed by Maria Santos, the paralegal who'd become our unofficial legal coordinator. Derek Williams, the IT specialist from 2 streets over, brought his laptop and an expression that meant business. "I've been analyzing digital evidence patterns," Derek announced, connecting his computer to our television. "Cheryl's been sloppy with her electronic footprint. Every fake review about Jake's business, every anonymous report, every HOA violation email, they all trace back to the same IP address cluster." The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the faint scent of printer ink as Derek produced page after page of digital forensics evidence. This wasn't amateur hour anymore. We were building a case that could stand up in federal court. Maria opened her legal research folder, revealing weeks of work on HOA dissolution procedures and criminal fraud statutes. As a paralegal with 15 years' experience, she understood exactly how to structure evidence for maximum prosecutorial impact. Based on the financial crimes Jake uncovered, any 10% of homeowners can petition the county for immediate forensic audit, Maria explained, highlighting relevant statutes. With documented embezzlement over $50,000, we're looking at automatic felony charges with 2 to 10-year sentences. Harold had been working his own angles through veteran networks and municipal contacts. His research revealed the beautiful legal reality of our situation. Cheryl's financial mismanagement had voided the HOA's legal authority over residents. Every violation, every fine, every enforcement action from the past 3 years was legally meaningless. Better yet, Harold continued, board members, without proper bonding and insurance, face personal asset seizure for organizational debt. Cheryl's house, cars, savings accounts, everything becomes fair game for recovery. Our strategy crystallized over the next 2 hours. We'd coordinate a public revelation at the quarterly HOA meeting, scheduled for the following Saturday. Derek would handle secure document sharing and recording equipment. State law allowed documentation of public meetings. Maria would prepare legal petitions for HOA audit and criminal investigation. Harold would organize affected residents for maximum attendance. Meanwhile, Diane was working her own angles through official channels. District Attorney Rebecca Chen had already expressed interest in the case after reviewing preliminary evidence. The county prosecutor's office specialized in exactly this type of municipal corruption, and they had resources we couldn't access as private citizens. "Professional forensic accounting will trace every dollar Cheryl stole," Diane explained, reviewing the prosecution timeline. "Financial crimes leave digital fingerprints that are impossible to erase. Every fake invoice, every diverted payment, every fraudulent transfer creates permanent evidence." Tuesday evening brought our coalition's largest gathering yet. 12 families crammed into Harold's living room, sharing stories that revealed the true scope of Cheryl's operation. Mrs. Rodriguez described being told her children's outdoor play was culturally inappropriate noise. Derek's teenage son had been cited for aggressive walking patterns while jogging through the neighborhood. Even the Hendersons, an elderly white couple, faced harassment for hosting their grandson too frequently. "This isn't random enforcement," Sarah observed, organizing complaint patterns on Derek's laptop. "This is systematic targeting of anyone who doesn't fit Cheryl's demographic preferences. That's civil rights violation territory." The technical preparation was extensive but necessary. Derek created an encrypted evidence database accessible to law enforcement and our legal team. Harold coordinated with local media. The corruption angle interested investigative reporters who'd been following municipal fraud trends. Maria prepared backup legal documentation through contacts at the district attorney's office. Wednesday night, our kitchen table became command central as we rehearsed Saturday's presentation. The lingering scent of wood stain from my workshop mixed with the aroma of Diane's stress cooking. She always made elaborate meals when processing complex cases. "Cheryl's going to try controlling the narrative," Diane warned, cleaning her service weapon with practiced precision, a habit that helped her think through tactical problems. "She'll claim accounting errors, personal vendettas, anything to avoid criminal responsibility." Harold smiled grimly. That's exactly what we're counting on. Every lie she tells in public becomes additional evidence of obstruction and fraud. The woman's about to hang herself with her own rope. Derek finished configuring our recording equipment while Maria reviewed state statutes one final time. Everything was legal, everything was documented, everything was prosecutable. By Thursday, our evidence package was complete. Financial records proving $127,000 in theft, digital forensics showing systematic harassment, witness statements documenting discrimination, and official complaints filed with multiple agencies. Cheryl had spent months building her surveillance operation against us. Now it was our turn to show her what organized resistance actually looked like. Cheryl must have sensed the walls closing in, because her next moves reeked of pure desperation. Thursday morning, I walk out to load my truck for a job site and immediately know something's wrong. All 4 tires are flat, with neat puncture marks that scream intentional sabotage. But here's where Cheryl's criminal mind got creative. Scattered around my truck are several broken beer bottles and a skateboard with scratched paint, like some teenage vandalism gone wrong. The setup was almost admirable in its calculation. Make it look like neighborhood kids had gotten drunk and gone on a destructive spree, deflecting blame from the obvious suspect. Unfortunately for Cheryl, my security cameras had captured everything. 2:47 a.m., Cheryl sneaking across the street in dark clothing, carrying what looked like an ice pick. 2:52 a.m., systematic tire puncturing, one wheel at a time. 2:58 a.m., carefully arranging evidence to suggest teenage vandalism. 3:03 a.m., retreating to her house, looking satisfied with her handiwork. The woman had literally documented her own felony vandalism in high-definition video. But that was just the opening move in what would become Cheryl's week of spectacular criminal stupidity. Friday afternoon, Building Inspector Tony Morales called with news that made my blood boil. "Jake, I need to report something that happened yesterday. Marshall Blackwood cornered me in the City Hall parking lot with what he called a business opportunity." Tony's voice carried professional disgust as he explained Marshall's pitch. Prioritize enforcement in problem neighborhoods, focus inspections on undesirable elements, and receive quarterly bonuses from an unnamed municipal fund. When Tony refused, Marshall got specific about budget cuts that might affect the building department's staffing levels. 22 years I've done this job with integrity, Tony continued, and this political hack thinks he can buy me off with taxpayer money? I've already filed ethics complaints with the County Board and Internal Affairs. Marshall had just committed felony bribery of a public official, documented by a county inspector who took detailed notes of every corrupt offer. But Cheryl's masterstroke of criminal genius came Monday morning. I'm reviewing weekend security footage when my phone rings. Sarah Chen, and she's furious. "Jake, someone's been posting fake reviews about your business online. Terrible ones claiming shoddy work, overcharging, property damage. There are 12 new reviews from this weekend alone." Derek's digital forensics skills proved invaluable here. Within 2 hours, he'd traced every fake review to IP addresses registered to Maplewood Community Services LLC, Cheryl's personal consulting company. She'd been using her embezzlement front organization to conduct cybercrime. "She's not just posting negative reviews," Derek explained, showing me screenshots. "She's created fake customer profiles with detailed backstories, fake project photos, even fake documentation of damages your work supposedly caused." The reviews were creative fiction. Claims I'd damaged original hardwood floors, overcharged for simple repairs, left job sites messy and unprofessional. Each review included specific details designed to destroy my reputation with potential customers. But here's where Cheryl's desperation led to her biggest tactical error. Tuesday morning brought the call that changed everything. Child Protective Services wanted to schedule a home inspection based on anonymous reports of unsafe living conditions and potential child endangerment. "We don't have children." "Ma'am," I explained to the CPS caseworker, "my wife and I don't have kids. We've never had children. Our home is just 2 adults and occasionally my workshop projects." The confused silence on the other end told me everything. "Sir, our report specifically mentions concerns about children's safety in your home environment." The caller provided detailed descriptions of unsafe conditions affecting minors in your household. Cheryl had filed a false CPS report so detailed and specific that it took the caseworker 20 minutes to verify we were childless. But once they did, her lies became prosecutable evidence of filing false reports with government agencies, a federal crime when it involves child welfare services. The CPS supervisor was apologetic but thorough. Mr. Torino, whoever filed this report provided fabricated evidence about children in your home. That's not just harassment, that's criminal abuse of federal child protection resources. When the caseworker arrived for her required follow-up visit, our home passed inspection so thoroughly she asked for referrals to my contracting services. The irony was beautiful. Cheryl's false report had just generated a glowing professional endorsement from a federal inspector. Wednesday evening, Diane came home carrying the professional satisfaction that comes from watching criminals destroy themselves through overreach. "Jake, Cheryl's made a fatal mistake," she said, reviewing the week's evidence. "Tire vandalism, attempted bribery, cybercrime, false federal reports. She's committed enough felonies to qualify for organized crime prosecution under RICO statutes." Cheryl's desperation had transformed our neighborhood harassment case into a federal criminal investigation. Every lie, every false report, every act of sabotage had created permanent evidence that would stand up in court. The woman had essentially built her own prison cell, one felony at a time. Cheryl's final gambit was pure desperation disguised as a publicity stunt, and it spectacularly backfired. Thursday evening, official-looking flyers appeared in every mailbox throughout Maplewood Estates. The header read, "Concerned Citizens Meeting, Corruption in Local Law Enforcement," in bold red letters that screamed emergency. The flyers accused Diane of using police resources for personal vendettas against law-abiding neighbors, claimed our family was conducting systematic intimidation of community leaders, and alleged excessive police presence was making residents feel unsafe in their own neighborhood. Cheryl had scheduled her character assassination for Saturday morning at the community center, the same day as our planned HOA meeting revelation. Her timing was perfect, her strategy was clever, and her execution was about to become a master class in public humiliation. "We need to attend this thing," Harold advised during our emergency Friday night strategy session. "If we let her control the narrative unopposed, she might actually convince people." Derek's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. "I'll live stream the entire meeting on social media. Let the public see exactly what kind of concerned citizen they're dealing with in real time." Saturday morning, the community center buzzed with nervous energy as roughly 30 residents filed in. Cheryl had arranged the seating theater style, positioning herself behind a podium like she was conducting an official hearing. The local news crew she'd contacted was setting up cameras, clearly expecting a corruption expose. What they got was front row seats to a criminal meltdown. Cheryl began her presentation with charts and graphs showing police response patterns in our neighborhood, claiming Diane had been deploying deputies for personal purposes. She displayed photos of patrol cars on our street, timestamps of excessive visits, and documentation of intimidation tactics against community volunteers. The performance was almost believable until Maria Santos stood up. "Mrs. Blackwood, these police visits you're complaining about were responses to false emergency calls that you made." Cheryl's confidence flickered. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Actually, you do." Maria pulled out official dispatch records. 6 false police reports over 18 months, all targeting the same families, all made by anonymous callers later traced to your phone number. The room's energy shifted perceptibly. Residents who'd come expecting to hear about police corruption were suddenly listening to evidence of systematic harassment by their HOA president. Derek's live stream was gaining viewers rapidly, comments flooding in as people realized they were watching a real-time expose of neighborhood corruption. The news reporter, who'd expected to cover municipal misconduct, began taking notes about an entirely different story. But Harold delivered the kill shot. The 74-year-old veteran stood up slowly, carrying a manila folder that had become his signature prop. "Ma'am, before you continue spreading lies about Sheriff Torino, perhaps you should explain where the HOA's money went." Cheryl's face went white. "I don't know what you mean." $78,000 in unpaid county assessments, $127,000 in diverted HOA funds, 3 years of fraudulent financial reports. Harold's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades dealing with liars. "Should I continue?" The community center erupted. Residents who'd been paying HOA dues faithfully for years suddenly understood why their roads weren't being maintained, why common area improvements never materialized, why simple requests for financial statements were met with bureaucratic stonewalling. "That's completely false," Cheryl shouted, but her voice cracked with panic. "These people are conducting a malicious campaign against legitimate community leadership." The news reporter stepped forward, microphone ready. Mrs. Blackwood, can you provide current financial statements showing proper use of HOA funds? That information is confidential pending board review. Actually, it's not. Maria produced another document. State law requires quarterly financial disclosure to any homeowner upon request. We've been requesting these statements for 6 months. Derek's live stream had reached several hundred viewers, comments overwhelmingly supporting our evidence presentation. The #Maplewood Corruption Exposed hashtag was trending locally as viewers shared the stream with friends and family. Cheryl made one last desperate attempt to regain control. These accusations are ridiculous. I've served this community faithfully for 4 years, and I won't be intimidated by criminals trying to avoid legitimate enforcement. That's when Diane stood up. The entire room fell silent as our county sheriff rose from her seat in the back row, her presence transforming the atmosphere from heated community meeting to official law enforcement briefing. Mrs. Blackwood, Diane said, her voice carrying 20 years of professional authority, you're absolutely right about one thing. Criminals should be held accountable. She pulled out her badge and placed it on the nearest table where everyone could see it clearly. You're under arrest. The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed through the stunned silence as the news cameras captured every moment. Derek's live stream exploded with viewers as word spread that they were watching a real arrest happen during what was supposed to be a community meeting. Cheryl's carefully planned character assassination had become her own public downfall, broadcast live for the entire county to witness. What should have been a routine quarterly meeting became the most attended event in Maplewood Estates history. By 2 p.m., the elementary school cafeteria was packed with 47 homeowners, triple the usual attendance. Word of Cheryl's morning arrest had spread through the neighborhood faster than gossip at a church social, and residents who'd never shown interest in HOA politics suddenly wanted front row seats to the finale. The local news crew had followed us from the community center, recognizing this was developing into a major story about suburban corruption. 3 off-duty deputies from Diane's department attended as coalition supporters, their presence adding an official weight to the proceedings. Harold Murphy had prepared a presentation that would make any prosecutor proud, visual aids, financial charts, and documentation organized for maximum impact. The forensic audit results were still pending, but we had enough evidence to bury Cheryl's operation permanently. Marshal Blackwood sat alone in the front row, his wife conspicuously absent due to being in county lockup. His face carried the pale resignation of someone whose own criminal charges were probably being filed as we spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harold began, his military bearing commanding immediate attention, "we're here to discuss the systematic theft of your money by your elected HOA board." The room erupted before he could continue. Residents who'd been paying dues faithfully while watching neighborhood services deteriorate suddenly had answers to questions they'd been asking for years. "Over the past 3 years," Harold continued, "your HOA president has stolen $127,000 through fraudulent financial reporting and unauthorized fund transfers." He activated Derek's presentation system displaying bank records, county assessment documents, and transfer logs that painted an undeniable picture of organized embezzlement. Every slide generated angrier murmurs from residents who were calculating how much of their money had been stolen. "But the theft was just part of a larger criminal operation," Maria Santos added, taking the floor with her paralegal's precision. "Systematic harassment, false police reports, bribery of public officials, and witness intimidation were used to prevent discovery of the financial crimes." She presented the timeline of harassment targeting families who'd requested financial transparency, showing how Cheryl's enforcement actions correlated directly with questions about missing money. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, her voice shaking with years of suppressed anger. "She told my children they were too loud for this neighborhood. She made us feel like we didn't belong here because we asked where our dues were going." Sarah Chen nodded emphatically. "Every family that questioned the budget got targeted for violations. This wasn't coincidence. This was systematic intimidation to protect criminal activity." Derek's real-time documentation was streaming the entire meeting, creating a permanent record of residents' testimonials about Cheryl's abuse of power. The #JusticeForMaplewood hashtag was gaining momentum across social media platforms. But the moment everyone was waiting for came when Marshall finally spoke. "I want to make a statement," he said, his voice barely audible. The room fell silent as the man who'd enabled Cheryl's operation prepared to either defend or abandon his criminal partner. My wife's actions over the past 3 years were unauthorized. I had no knowledge of financial irregularities or harassment campaigns. His voice cracked as he realized his marriage and career were both ending simultaneously. I've already submitted my resignation to the city planning department. The collective gasp from residents was audible. Marshall was abandoning ship, leaving Cheryl to face the criminal charges alone. Harold resumed control of the meeting with veteran efficiency. Given the documented criminal activity and financial mismanagement, I move for immediate dissolution of the current HOA board and emergency election of interim leadership. Seconded, came from multiple voices simultaneously. The vote was unanimous, 47-0 in favor of dissolution. Furthermore, Maria announced, the county prosecutor has agreed to negotiate debt forgiveness for stolen assessment payments in exchange for full community cooperation with the ongoing criminal investigation. More applause, this time mixed with relieved cheering from residents who'd feared losing their homes to municipal liens. Derek's live stream had reached over 1,000 viewers as news of the successful community uprising spread beyond Maplewood. Comments poured in from other neighborhoods dealing with HOA corruption, asking for advice on organizing similar resistance efforts. The meeting concluded with the formation of a voluntary Maplewood Community Council focused on mutual aid rather than enforcement. No mandatory dues, no violation fines, no surveillance cameras. Just neighbors helping neighbors maintain their shared spaces. As residents filed out, energized by their collective victory over corruption, the news reporter interviewed Harold about lessons other communities could learn from their successful resistance. The key, Harold explained, was documentation, organization, and patience. Bullies rely on isolated victims who won't fight back. When you organize evidence and present a united front, even the most entrenched corruption crumbles. Cheryl's empire had fallen in less than 6 hours, destroyed by the very community she'd tried to control through fear and intimidation. Justice served, neighborhood style. 6 months later, Maplewood Estates had transformed from a surveillance state into something resembling an actual community. Cheryl pled guilty to 14 felony counts, including embezzlement, fraud, filing false police reports, and conspiracy to corrupt public officials. Her sentence, 7 years in state prison, full restitution of stolen funds, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. Marshall received 3 years probation after cooperating fully with prosecutors, but his career in municipal planning was finished permanently. The neighborhood's recovery was remarkable to witness. Without the constant threat of violation notices and harassment, residents began actually talking to each other instead of hiding behind closed doors. Children played freely in yards where surveillance cameras had once monitored their every movement. Our voluntary community council met monthly at rotating houses, focusing on genuine neighborhood improvement rather than petty enforcement. Mrs. Rodriguez started a community garden using the former HOA office space, transforming a symbol of authoritarian control into something that fed families and brought people together. Harold Murphy became our unofficial neighborhood historian, documenting the successful resistance effort for other communities dealing with similar corruption. His detailed case study was being shared through veteran networks and civic organizations as a blueprint for organized community action. Sarah Chen organized monthly block parties that would have horrified Cheryl's aesthetic sensibilities, but created the kind of social connections that make neighborhoods actually safe. Derek's technical skills helped establish a legitimate community communication network. No surveillance, just neighbors sharing information about everything from lost pets to home security. My contracting business flourished with neighborhood referrals and testimonials from the coalition members. More importantly, the CPS caseworker who'd investigated Cheryl's false report referred 3 different families to my services after being impressed by our home's safety features and professional organization. The ripple effects extended far beyond Maplewood. Our successful resistance inspired similar efforts in 12 other communities across 3 states. Harold's documentation methods were being taught in civic engagement workshops, and Derek's digital security protocols helped other neighborhoods organize safely against retaliation. But the crown jewel of our community transformation was the Maplewood Education Fund, established using recovered HOA money after all legitimate debts were settled. The annual scholarship program specifically supported trade school education, honoring blue-collar careers that people like Cheryl had tried to stigmatize. The first recipient was Marcus Rodriguez, the teenager Cheryl had harassed for playing basketball too aggressively in his own driveway. He used the scholarship to attend electrical trade school and now runs a successful apprenticeship program for other neighborhood kids. Diane's department received commendation from the State Attorney General for professional handling of the corruption investigation. Her case study on HOA fraud detection became required training for county sheriffs statewide, helping other law enforcement agencies recognize similar schemes before they could victimize entire communities. The legislative impact was equally satisfying. Our case contributed to state HOA reform, requiring annual independent audits, mandatory term limits for board positions, and enhanced penalties for financial crimes involving community associations. The Attorney General created a dedicated HOA abuse hotline with specialized investigation units trained specifically to handle these cases. Personal healing came gradually but completely. Diane and I finished restoring our Craftsman home, hosting neighborhood barbecues in the backyard where Cheryl's camera had once surveilled our every movement. The smell of charcoal and community laughter replaced the tension of constant harassment, and property lines became gathering spaces rather than battlegrounds. Derek's sister mentioned her workplace harassment by a property management company during one of our community cookouts, and I couldn't resist smiling. Sounds like people who think authority means they can abuse power, I told her. That's definitely another story about bullies getting what they deserve. The most rewarding transformation was watching our street come alive with normal neighborhood activity. Children riding bikes freely, neighbors chatting across property lines without fear of citation, and front porches being used for their intended purpose, building community connections rather than surveillance posts. As autumn arrived, bringing the rich scent of fallen leaves and the satisfaction of another successful growing season in Mrs. Rodriguez's community garden, I sat on our front porch with Diane, watching Harold teach neighborhood kids how to properly display American flags, while Derek helped elderly residents with basic computer skills. This was what neighborhoods were supposed to be, places where people supported each other instead of tearing each other down. Drop your worst HOA nightmare in the comments. Let's see who's dealt with bigger tyrants than Cheryl. Hit that subscribe button if you love seeing bullies get what they deserve, and ring the notification bell for more justice stories. Share this with anyone fighting petty authority. Sometimes the system works when good people work the system.